happening. I'm recording. Woo, we're doing it. Thank you so much. I'm going to turn it over to Sheila Martin once again to get us started for today's session.
Thank you, Milan, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sheila Martin, Vice President for Economic Development and Community Engagement at APLU, and welcome to our 2020 webinar series. As most of you know, we were supposed to be in New York last week, all together, hosted by Cornell University and the SUNY system. But unfortunately, because of the pandemic that we are all living in, we converted our summer meeting because it had such great content. We didn't want to lose it. So we converted it into a series of webinars that will run monthly into November. So this is the second of the series. And we have a very interesting and exciting program planned for you today that involves you telling us what you're doing around sustainability on your campus. I want to start by just giving those of you who are not familiar some background. Uh-oh, I'm going to share my screen. Are you all seeing my screen?
Yes, we can see your screen now.
I cannot advance the slides for some reason. Okay, now it's going. Okay, great. So the Commission on Economic and Community Engagement convenes our senior economic development and community engagement administrators of APLU members. And we get together to share our experiences, we do professional development, and we're really focused on improving the practices of universities in the areas of talent and workforce development, innovation, entrepreneurship, and technology-based economic development, and place and community development through public service, outreach, extension, and engagement. And there are a number of engagement opportunities that you can participate in as a member of CECE. We have our summer meeting, usually in person, and our annual meeting, usually in person. We also have some learning communities that we're running right now, one on rural economic engagement, one on community engagement online, and the Innovation and Economic Prosperities program also has a learning community for those folks who are involved in the IEP program. We also run a couple of awards programs, the IEP Awards and the McGraw Awards, and some of our members participate in research and demonstration projects that our office puts on, and in order to raise the level of awareness and understanding of effective practices in economic and community engagement. So we also have an executive committee that guides the activities of our commission, and we are currently taking applications for the executive committee. So if any of you want to be in this photo along with some of our panelists today, please do take a look at that application and apply to become one of our executive committee members. So I also want to let you know that today there is a Q&A box that we will be using for curating questions for the panelists. And before we get started, I want to give you a little bit of practice using Padlet. So later on in the program, we'll be using Padlet to get your ideas onto the table. And Milan is going to share her screen showing us the Padlet, correct? So I'm going to stop my share. And we're just going to start by asking you to go into the Padlet using the link that Milan has put in the chat, and tell us your institution and your institution's mascot. Oh, so we've got Washington State. You can see everybody who's here right now. We have a variety of folks participating. And I really like the use of the Spartan logo there. That's really great. You can add pictures to the Padlet. We've got University of Minnesota Crookston, Iowa State Cyclones. That was me. I'm an alum. I don't actually attend there now, but okay. So you've all had a great opportunity to practice the Padlet. So we'll go back to the I'll go back to sharing my screen now, Milan, if that's okay. Great. Okay, so today's panel is a number of great people on the panel today. Steve Gavazzi, Professor of Human Sciences at The Ohio State University. Rena Cachones, Chief Engagement Officer at Northern Illinois University. Sharon Painter, Assistant Vice Chancellor for Economic and Community Engagement at East Carolina University. Amanda Whitman, Director of Community Engaged Curricula and Strategy at Cornell. And before I turn it over to them, I would like to just spend a few minutes talking about sustainability and the importance of sustainability goals for universities. Now, most of us, let me get my, when we examine, most of us think about sustainability in terms of the triple bottom line: economic, environmental, and social sustainability, which many people actualize as equity, or the third E. And when we examine the definition of economic development that we've adopted as a commission, this was a definition that was developed by Marianne Feldman and her colleagues. It really has evolved into a multidimensional asset-based definition. And when we look at this, when we look at the Sustainable Development Goals developed by the United Nations, we can see that they also focus on this idea of asset development: human asset development, environmental asset development, and economic asset development. And they also emphasize the development of social institutions that promote peace and justice and equality and enable the world to partner in meeting those goals. So that is really quite consistent with the asset-based notion of economic development that we've adopted. It's incredibly important that there be interactivity among the Sustainable Development Goals, that we're able to align these three areas so that we can take advantage of the synergy among them and avoid the negative trade-offs. So how might we achieve that alignment on our campuses and with our communities? That's what we're going to talk about today. So we'll start with Steve Gavazzi, who's going to give us some background about how the role of universities in this arena has evolved. Steve?
Okay, thank you, Sheila, and thanks everyone for joining us. Sheila, I can't see your screen now. I don't know if everyone else can. I can go to the slides because I know you sent them to me earlier, but
Let's see.
I don't see.
Let me figure out what's going on here. Sorry about that. Okay. All right. How's that? Can you see it now?
Yep, that's great. Thank you. So what I'd like to take you through in really brief fashion is a set of what I think are really 3 steps towards some codification of engagement activities that universities have taken on over the years. And not on this slide, but something I'd like you to keep in mind as we roll through these, the set of brief slides that I've developed, is that there's both an outward facing component to this attempt to systematize or codify engagement efforts, but there's also an inward facing component as well. And there's really been a blend of both of those efforts. And so I'd like you to just keep that in mind. In other words, said it slightly differently, each of these steps was meant to present engagement both to an internal audience of higher education professionals, but also an external audience, all of our different stakeholders, including, I think most importantly, the citizens that our universities have been designed to serve. So step 1 really comes about in the mid-90s, and there was actually a series of reports that were issued over a 4-year period by what was known as the Kellogg Commission. It has a longer name there, as you can see on your screen, but for all intents and purposes, it's been known as the Kellogg Commission. And the commission was really brought together, funded by the Kellogg Foundation, in order to help universities get the word out on all of the different things that they were involved with at the time. And you can see some of the topics that were included in these different reports, such as the student experience, student access, learning environments, campus culture. But the one that really has lived on long past its publication date was the one on the engaged institution. And so this we can really see as the first step in helping people to understand how is it that universities were reaching out, and in some ways very different than the classic land grant model of extension, in which there oftentimes was a way of seeing it as very one-sided. It was very unidimensional from the standpoint of extension had certain expertise to offer, and so they would just simply find audiences that were interested in that. The idea about engagement was that, at least in theory, universities would be going out into the communities and they would be asking those community members or stakeholders, what is it that you need from this university? And then we would assemble the expertise in order to make that happen. But again, the Kellogg Commission was a report. There was nothing actually that directly codified or put any sort of structure at all to that. We have to get to the second step, and that's the Carnegie step. So the Carnegie Foundation is best known for Carnegie units, and Carnegie units were actually developed, for those of you who know the story, to get old professors to retire. There actually was not a retirement system back in the late 1800s and early 1900s, and so Andrew Carnegie gave quite a sum of money actually to develop a retirement system for professors. And they had to be able to track those units in some standardized way so that they knew how long actually someone had put in order to qualify for those benefits. So as an extension of that, Carnegie has been involved in a lot of other standardizations, right? So we know how Carnegie has been used, or Carnegie has used its influence to create Carnegie classifications so that we know that there are PhD granting institutions, master's granting institutions, and so on. So different levels of involvement in both degree granting and also research activity. So at the tail end of the Carnegie's work with regards to the standardization came this classification for community engagement. So the thing that was really great about what Carnegie was doing was they were saying, hey, this is voluntary, and we'd like you to do some self-assessment of the work that you're doing in the community. And as a result, over now I think it's a 15-year period, there have been approximately 365 schools that have received that designation. So the best point about the Carnegie work is that it started the classification system, but perhaps the biggest Achilles heel is that it was all self-assessment. So it's not until we get to the third step that we really begin to see a better evolution of how we could really begin to codify our engagement efforts in a way in which there was not only some internal face validity, but also some external validity as well. And that came with, in 2013, with APLU beginning to award what was known as the Innovation and Economic Prosperity Designation. And this was given specifically to universities, and I'm quoting now from the APLU document, that demonstrated a meaningful, substantial, and sustainable commitment to university economic engagement with the communities that they serve. So the good news about this was that it was not only a self-assessment, and so all of these different institutions did do an intensive assessment process, but they also then reached out to their partners, and part of the documentation had to include letters of support, basically, that said, from members of the community, we are in fact doing meaningful economic engagement work. To date, there have been 66 universities that have received that designation, and I know this is an ongoing process, and I think as the word gets out about IEP, we'll continue to see more universities do that. So basically, we'd like to then talk about the IEP designation itself. It's based on what are called 4 simple ideas. And as you see on the screen, those are know, measure, tell, and engage. So if you put that together in sentence form, basically economic engagement activities are thought to have meaningful impact when universities know, that's the top, what they do well and what they need to improve on, when they measure, bottom right, their engagement levels, and when they're able to tell, bottom left, their story about the economic contributions that they're making. And then engagement sits in the middle because it's believed that those other three simple ideas then put universities into a better position to engage collaboratively with campus and community partners to promote economic prosperity. Okay, so what I have been doing for the past several months now is I've been writing stories. I'm a regular contributor to Forbes.com, and I've been helping to get the word out on why the IEP designation is so important. And so one of the first articles that I actually wrote on the IEP designation happened as a result of some of the stories that I was doing on Ohio University. And so we simply used OU as an example of where talent, innovation, and place efforts all come together. And of course, so talent, and Sheila talked about this at the beginning, talent involves a lot of development of workforce. Innovation has a lot to do with entrepreneurial ecosystems, and place development, that's really where those community partnerships take root. Remember also that this comes from the legacy of when we used to talk about the kind of the three-part mission of the universities, including land grants, which was about teaching, research, and service, which was an in-between step as well that talked about learning, discovery, and engagement. So we continue to see an evolution in ideas from inputs really to outcomes. And so we're at the outcomes stage now of talking about these three different efforts. So along came the pandemic in the middle of writing about some of these different kinds of things. And what we were hearing very clearly from external audiences was, so what have you done for me lately? And so the question that was really posed was, is there a way to begin to capture what it is that universities are doing in the midst of the pandemic? And so a subsequent article that I wrote, and again, I used simply two examples. Sheila, if you would advance the slide. I used two examples. One was Kansas State, and the other, you have to go backwards one. So Kansas State and UNC Chapel Hill. And in each case, what we saw was, we saw a very real set of examples that we could give where each of these universities was partnering in some very meaningful, very substantial way with the communities that they were serving, specifically around COVID-19 issues. For Kansas State, it was great because we could tell the story not only of some of the medical clinical work that they were doing, but also how they were researching lots of different areas that had to do with some of the biological preparedness. And so as a for instance, there was work that they were doing on the food supply chains and other kinds of things like that. So this was great. UNC Chapel Hill was involved with a lot of development of PPE, personal protective equipment, especially among their students and in collaboration with the medical centers. But also another great point in that story was they're reaching out to other universities in the state, including Duke and North Carolina State. So again, great stories being told about this. And the essential point here, and again, I get back to the beginning of what it is that I talked about earlier, which is that there is both an internal audience that a lot of this codification has been pointed at, but also, I think perhaps more importantly, that we're also trying to engage and further help our external audiences understand what it is that we're doing. So I leave you with the final note, just in terms of beginning to think about things, which is we've placed such a heavy emphasis to date on economic sustainability. The question I'd like to raise is, so what about environmental sustainability and what about social sustainability? We see this in some of the work that's already going on inside of IEP, but it in some ways is not as targeted and not as focused as certainly the economic development component of that. So I would just like the audience to continue to think about that as we roll through this. And that, I think I've set it up perfectly for Rena.
All right.
Great, thank you so much, Steve. Oh, Sheila, go ahead.
I was just going to thank Steve and turn it over to you, Rena. So go ahead.
All right, thank you. Well, nice to see everyone through our screens today. Very glad to be here to talk about this important topic of advancing economic, environmental, and social sustainability. And what I thought I'd do is just take a quick spin through 3 initiatives that are happening at NIU that will give you kind of a view of what we are doing in each of these areas. So if we could go to the next slide. Just wanted to tell you about a crisis response to support small business that NIU has been engaged with over the last 4 months. Of course, when the pandemic hit and all the businesses had to be closed down, we started to look at what we could do to support our local community. DeKalb is where NIU is located, is a small rural community. There is a small business community that obviously was very hard hit, just as it was in all of your university towns as well. So we very quickly convened a community university response team. And members of our team started calling it, hey, we're united, we're unites. And somebody came up with the acronym University and Neighbors Investing Together for Economic Success. So we are DeKalb County Unites, and understanding the need to really serve as that anchor institution and to direct purchasing power as needed, and to encourage other large institutions and businesses in the area to do the same, to really help support the small business sector. So we put together a number of resources to support and encourage the small business sector. We had a website with lots of different information about federal loan programs and things like that. We did a series of webinars. In fact, this committee met 3 times a week. We had webinars 3 times a week. Everything from disaster recovery loans to marketing 101, helping the small businesses who maybe didn't have any kind of digital presence to see what we could do to help support them in very quick development so they could keep some type of trade going. We also had individual consultations. Some of our members who had a lot of success with getting small business loans were helping others. We had a couple of businesses who offered office hours, and anybody who wanted to, who didn't have the resources, could come in, scan documents, and do those kinds of things, of course, with safe distancing protocols and things like that. As I mentioned, we thought outreach to direct local purchasing power was very important. We had general marketing and awareness to help local residents understand the importance of giving a call to the local hardware store and allowing them to deliver something to your curb, as opposed to just calling one of the national online stores that we tend to always go to. And so we also talked to the large companies about accelerating local purchasing. So if you typically in the fall buy all of your paper, can you buy it now from a local small business? So there were a number of things that we did. We did a masking awareness campaign. So this was something that economic sustainability of our community, of course, is very important to the university. We want to be able to have our community, our faculty, our staff, our students enjoy the small businesses, enjoy the restaurants. So we did a number of different things with our partners to ensure that those small businesses would be supported and would be able to sustain themselves during this time. And DeKalb County Unites continues to work with the businesses in the area, and we're now morphing into a group that will continue to be together and see what other kinds of things we can do to direct local purchasing power and get people to think about making small business purchases in the local community. So let's go on to the next slide, please. This is a large-scale, really exciting initiative that we're working on with the University of Illinois. And I want to acknowledge the leadership of the University of Illinois in our state. They came up with the Discovery Partners Institute, which is a $500 million initiative that is going to have not only statewide, but really national and international impact. And so the University of Illinois' vision was that there would be an Illinois Innovation Network established so that this impact could be throughout the state and that there would be hubs at the other universities throughout the state. So they were able to get a $500 million state appropriation for the University of Illinois, and there is a hub that is being established at Northern Illinois University that we're calling the Northern Illinois Center for Community Sustainability, or NICS. And this builds on existing areas of expertise and regional assets and needs. We're looking at 3 areas. Food systems innovation, so we're looking at multidisciplinary research, new methods of food production, working with partners around the state, across the US, internationally. Also linking with the Chicago metropolitan food system. DeKalb is a rural area, but we're about an hour down the road from Chicago, this world-class city. And there is a very exciting food system in the area, and lots of innovation going on there that we can connect to. And DeKalb also has a very rich agricultural heritage that we want to honor and build on and recognize. We're also looking at water resources management. So NIU faculty, students, II, and partners are developing new sustainable water management systems for agriculture, industry, and personal consumption. And then climate change adaptation. So researchers are studying areas including biodiversity, ecosystem restoration, environmental maintenance, and response to extreme climate events. So this will be a 30,000 square foot facility. As mentioned, because of the University of Illinois' leadership, there is a $15 million appropriation that was made to NIU. We're doing fundraising for the rest of the funds that will be needed for the development of NICS. And this project is really generating a lot of conversations about food system innovation, water resources, environmental resilience, adaptation, including research and academic programs that are cross-cut with policy, development, and environmental law programs. So NIU faculty are working with U of I's College of Agriculture, Consumer, and Environmental Sciences about food system academic programs. So we are looking for development of shared curriculum, starting with student exchange between the 2 campuses, the Discovery Partners Institute hub, and ramping up to a shared degree program on the metropolitan food system. So this initiative is really leveraging the peri-urban location of DeKalb, our strong tradition of an ag food system innovation, and the diversity of our community, and a growing emphasis and interest in local foods. And it dovetails very nicely with plans for the expansion of a community-based community gardens initiative. And we had already been talking with the DeKalb County Community Gardens about the possibility of establishing their planned community food and education center on our campus. So the synergies that are coming from the academic research, the opportunities for our students to be involved with experiential learning, the opportunities for local food entrepreneurs to be involved with both the Community Food and Education Center, and also in some respects with NICS. We're looking at small business development and food systems innovation. And frankly, we have some food scarcity issues with some of the members of our community. So educating people about healthy foods, helping to improve their access to healthy foods are other goals that this NICS and the development that it will really help generate will bring. So we're really excited about that and looking forward to developing that. And had we been together in New York for our conference, our plan was to kind of workshop this and talk with the group and get ideas about the development of the Community Food and Education Center and how we could tie it to our work with NICS. So let's move on to our next slide, and that is on the social sustainability front. I'd like to tell you about our Illinois Migrant Education Program. This is something that is relatively new to NIU. This program had been run by a community-based organization, and they were doing a good job of running it at the grassroots, but having it affiliated with the university allows us to take advantage of the infrastructure that we have, the expertise of our faculty members, to really, we think, kind of take it to the next level. So we have bilingual staff embedded in communities throughout the state. We're connecting migrant workers with resources and especially their families. We're looking to ensure that the students, the young children who are traveling with their families around the state looking for work, and not even just around the state, but throughout the US, following the crops, that they have an opportunity to get an education, to stay in school. Many of the families have trouble keeping the students in school. The children go into different schools and the records aren't following them effectively all the time. So this program is something that we can, at the grassroots, at the moment that is needed, help families and students with things like food, healthcare, legal issues, jobs, those kinds of things, as well as looking at what their educational needs are and trying to build a foundation that will follow them throughout their journeys around to different states, so that there are records and someone who has been their teacher in Illinois can get on the phone and talk to their new teacher in Texas and talk to them about the students and see what kinds of things can be done to ensure the student's success. We have a summer school program that is affiliated with this, where transportation, meals, tutoring, enrichment programs are offered. At the end of the summer program, the students are supplied with backpacks that are full of supplies and things like that. There's also an emphasis on working with the families, things like Parent University, where we talk with parents about ways that they can encourage their students, ways that they can ensure that they are ready for school, and of course, ultimately, we want them to be able to go on to some kind of post-secondary education. So, as I mentioned, this is a statewide program. We have 8 statewide staff. There are 12 people who are doing this local summer school program. We have numerous partnerships with community-based organizations, healthcare institutions, faith-based organizations that are very important. This pandemic has been challenging for this program, I will say. You know, everybody's in their homes. It's much more difficult to go through our usual recruitment when we're going out and working in churches and schools. You know, our staff has had to be very creative. We've taken a number of the programs that we typically would do with our educational partners online. And so, you know, again, having this program affiliated with the university made it possible for us to very quickly pivot, and we had those online resources, and we had the people who could turn this into an online asset. So we are very proud of this program. We think we're making a tremendous impact. We work very closely with our community members who we are trying to impact and to give them voice and to really talk with them about what their needs are and understand those so that we can improve what we're doing and make sure that it's something that really does suit their needs. So again, that's just a very quick spin through 3 examples of what we're doing in Illinois.
Thank you. Thanks, Rena. And I'd like to turn it over now to Sharon to talk about her initiatives.
Thank you, Sheila. I join my colleagues in being excited to see 54 people participating today in our call. So thank you for the time to talk about some of our projects. I'm going to highlight relatively quickly 3 projects that are very, very different from one another. So I want to start with talking about an initiative related to the pharmaceutical industry in Eastern North Carolina. I think we have the wrong slide, Sheila, but it's all right. So the pharmaceutical, I'll tell you about the pharmaceutical industry. In Eastern North Carolina, we have a 5-county region that's known as the Biopharma Crescent. It's about halfway between Raleigh to our west and the Atlantic Ocean to the east. And in that area, there's a confluence of major interstate highways, Interstate 40, 95, some state roads, but also giving us access to consumer markets, airports, deep water ports. And the population in this area is about 600,000 people, many of whom have had education at the associate's degree or higher level, even though we're a little bit behind the United States in bachelor's degrees. The important piece of that is that our biopharma industry in this area employs a large number of folks, about 10,000 jobs in a 5-county area. And so the industry has come to higher education, to our university, to the community colleges, with significant challenges around patents that are expiring, research and development, productivity, looking at legislation and regulatory actions, cost pressures, diversification, all sorts of different things that are challenging the competitiveness of those firms. Over the last 50 years, higher education has worked together with that industry to build it and to use the natural resources around us, whether it is water, our workforce, or looking at how we can enhance that pipeline of employees. In the last 4 years, the pharmaceutical industry has invested $250 million in our region and created 500 jobs. And so at ECU, one of the things that we've done in response to listening to our industry partners and to thinking with them about how we maintain that competitive edge is to create a pharmaceutical development and manufacturing center of excellence. And in this facility, we do lab-based experiential education. We do good manufacturing practice, trainings. We're having 40 students a year that are graduating with GMP and analytical skills, but we're also focusing short courses to bolster knowledge of existing employees and give them special technical expertise that lets them stay competitive in that industry. The second program I'm going to talk about is Rise 29. So it's a program that I lead, and it's aimed at keeping students local, so keeping talent in our rural areas and doing that through entrepreneurship education. That program is one in which we have two different tracks to create and retain jobs. The first is for students to take their new ideas and launch small businesses, and for us to wrap the support around them that will allow those businesses to become real practicing firms in rural communities. We're working with the rural communities to identify what kinds of businesses they'd like to see in the places that they live and work, and having them work with us in actually recruiting student ideas to their main streets. The other thing that our students are doing is providing consulting to existing firms so that they can look for ways that they can diversify their revenue stream, that they can think about different sorts of business plans, that they're able to strengthen those those firms that have jobs already on the ground and not to lose traction there. And then the third program that I was going to talk about today is our Water Resources Center. And that is a relatively new initiative at ECU that brings together researchers from across our campus to work with our communities in a rural region. So as you might guess, a coastal state in the East, we deal with a lot of things that range from saltwater intrusion to sea level rise, hurricanes are a regular occurrence here. And so we're trying to think about globally, what does it mean for us to advance water-related research, education, and outreach in the state? So a couple examples of how we're doing that. One is in an NSF-funded proposal that's allowing us to look at rapid response post major coastal disasters and to think about coastal hazards. How do we use on-the-ground data collection and real-time data collection to inform communities' ability to weather the storm literally and to be resilient after it? Another is a project that a researcher who grew up in Eastern North Carolina and who is now an engineering faculty launched with a community that's only 5,000 people in the whole county. And so, you know, you start to think about, can 5,000 people inform the masses? And this faculty in this community might. They're looking at how we can understand flooding and develop a process with community input that allows us to know more about how communities are able to respond and design engineering solutions for the issues that they face. And so this is a very engaged process in which the faculty member went into the community and said, hey, I'm an engineer and I'm here to help. And they said, we don't need the help that you're offering, but what we really need is an answer to a different kind of question. And together they've come to this project that is now putting students literally into the field to look at coastal flooding. The third is an example of a project that relies on our agriculture and our farming industry. You might be surprised to know that we have almost as many hogs living in North Carolina as we do people. There are 9 million hogs here, stretched across about 40 major commercial farms. And there's a lot of issues and challenges that come with that. But one of the opportunities is to look at ways to turn to sustainable energy production related to those farms, and to think about that with one of the major industry partners in swine production, which is Smithfield Foods. And so we've been working on some bioenergy and some biogas projects that allow us to have community input along with industry in how we think about sustainable agriculture going forward.
Thanks, Sharon. And Amanda, it's you're up. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, full admittance there. I actually grew up in Greenville. My parents were faculty members at ECU, so it's always good to hear what they're doing in terms of all of that. So that's really fun to hear. Thanks for that, Sharon. So I think what's been so fun so far is that we've gotten to hear about these amazing programs that people are doing at universities across the country, thinking about the ways that they're combining economic sustainability, environmental sustainability, social sustainability, all of these kinds of things. And so what I wanted to do was kind of take a step back, right? And so as we look through and hear about all of these great examples, what might it be that allows us to understand what kind of makes all of those things successful, and perhaps what you all might be able to think about as some of the kind of mechanisms of aligning these three areas so that you might be able to kind of create them or build on them in your own situation. So that's what I'm going to talk about a little bit. And I've got 3 ideas around that, which I'm actually formulating and thinking about and responding to from everybody else's comments. So that's kind of interesting. Well, one of the first things that I think is really important and is a thread throughout all of these different kinds of programs, projects, initiatives, centers, is that they have figured out some kind of coordinating structure that allows them to align and come together on the topic of choice that they're choosing to interact with. So, you know, these are questions that really have to be figured out as part of this kind of whole process of creating the kinds of programs and initiatives that we're interested in here, these ones that bring together these various elements of engagement, economic engagement, social engagement. And so thinking through that, like, what does that look like for your campus? Are you a centralized campus or a decentralized campus? At Cornell, for instance, we're finding that, the fact that we are so decentralized means that we really have to work through the colleges. And so knowing that about our campus really, really helps us make some decisions about funding or programming to help kind of align these areas, right? They need to be mission driven. So whatever the special mission of your institution is, right? So both Raina and Sharon were talking about their commitment to the rural and the mission of their universities and the ways that those kind of really do drive the ways that their programs are put together. And they're context specific. So right now the pandemic is giving us a lot of interesting context as kind of Stephen was talking about, right? The ways that we can begin to use our context to do that. So thinking about the coordinating structures, and I put up some different kinds of coordinating structures that I think are really interesting. So you may be a networked structure, right? You may be someone where you have lots of different nodes of activity and there's a hub that's kind of keeping track of what's happening in all of those. It may be a structure that's more like a ladder, like people kind of go through it step by step by step. There's more hierarchy or there's more clarity around kind of the ways that works together. You might be a backbone organization, something that's kind of using collective impact as a way of thinking about it. So thinking about the coordinating structure that you have and that you're trying to build will help you think about how do we bring these 3 areas together. So that's the first one. The second one are mechanisms of alignment. And as I was sitting listening to everybody, I feel like I was too focused here on just research and really that these should be, what are the advantages from being at a higher ed institution that you can leverage? So one of them, the key ones, of course, is research and leveraging research, leveraging your faculty, leveraging your undergraduate researchers to really think about how do you make strides, how do you make new knowledge around these topics that are so important to environmental, so important to social issues. And so you saw that in the different ways that faculty are being brought together, that we're using that. And so I add something that we use at Cornell quite a bit, which is kind of the different ways that we can think about engagement, the different kinds and methods. But I would encourage you to think through what else might be there. You know, how does industry partnerships fit there? How do partnerships with federal government perhaps fit there, or the state government, kind of as Raina was talking about. So thinking about the ways that you align and the ways that you leverage what's unique and special about being in higher education allows you to kind of come together to develop and create these great programs. And then thirdly, I think thinking through partnerships, I think crucial to every single one of these examples that we've talked about and that Steve laid out at the very beginning are thinking about how do the partnerships work to move your ideas forward, right? And so how are you creating partnerships that are inclusive and reciprocal? How are you being intentional about making sure that the kinds of partners you have fit the kind of project or the kind of issue that you want to solve? So sometimes you may be working with industry partners, you may be working with local nonprofits, as in the case of the migrant workers, right? That could be a local community-based organization. You might be working with states, you might be working with federal government dollars, you know, thinking about how all of those kind of partnerships go together. And one of my favorite things about thinking about partnerships is this triangle that I've put up here. I think often when we're thinking about our partnerships, we sometimes get really, really focused on the results. So what are the outcomes of this? What are we getting to? Because we all really want to do good work in the world and we all really want to get there quickly. But thinking about, you know, to have successful partnerships, you really have to focus on a process. So that intentionality about building those partnerships, about working with them long-term, about being on the same page about, you know, what everybody's goals are and what everybody is bringing to the table. And then creating strong relationships, right? So that's the personal. I have a colleague who also says that partnerships move at the speed of trust. And so if you don't have those trusting relationships, you're never going to be able to build those kind of deep, impactful programs that really make and really kind of change our landscape economically, change the landscape socially and environmentally. So I would just say that thinking through as we kind of move into this next section where we're going to kind of pick y'all's brains a little bit, but thinking through kind of what are these mechanisms of alignment and how do they work on your campus for the topics that you're really interested in is something that I challenge you to think through.
Thank you, Amanda. That was great. So now is your turn. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, but before I do, there's going to be links. Those links are going to be put in the chat, actually. Milan, could you put the link to the first Padlet in the chat? And then we will go to that Padlet and we'll ask you to answer that first question. What method does your campus use to align sustainability, research, and engagement? And if I could ask the rest of the panelists to show their faces, then we can have a little conversation while we're waiting for some of those answers to show up on the Padlet. So I'd actually like to turn to Sharon and Rena to answer that question about the way that your different sustainability initiatives are connected and aligned. So why don't we start with Rena, since you're unmuted. Why don't you give us a little, some ideas about how that alignment is occurring?
Sure. We have really more informal ways of communicating than formal. I would say that like everything that we do in economic and community engagement, it really starts with relationships. We operate in multiple overlapping networks. So I think for us as engagement professionals, it is really our obligation and duty and privilege to get to know the faculty members and to get to know the people across campus, to understand what their research interests are, and so that we can think about how to take advantage of opportunities that arise. When the Discovery Partners Institute, Illinois Innovation Network opportunity arose, we were able to very quickly pivot because we had a good understanding of faculty interests, the research that was ongoing in these areas of climate change and water and food systems innovation. So I think the relationship building is very important and kind of supersedes any kind of formal process that you could put in place.
Thanks, Rena. And Sharon, how about at ECU? How are you accomplishing that alignment?
So I think Rena's right that the informal communication is probably the primary way that folks do the work. At ECU, we've got a couple of more formal mechanisms. One is that we have a group of senior administrators that meet right now monthly, called the Regional Transformation Council, and their goal is to think about the strategies and priorities of the institution, what resources are necessary to support the work that our industry and community partners are talking to us about their needs. And the other is we have 4 research clusters that are multidisciplinary groups of faculty across our campus that focus on research and engagement involving faculty, staff, students, and community and industry partners. And so those 4 clusters are big data and analytics. We have a biomaterials cluster, health behavior, and natural resources in the environment. And I think together that they really think about the way that the institution builds its body of engaged scholarly work.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's interesting. One of the things that that I was noting when I was looking at the Sustainable Development Goals and some of the literature around that is the importance of taking advantage of the things that make those goals complementary and trying to avoid the trade-offs. So I guess that would be another question I would ask would be, how are you dealing with those trade-offs between, and have you observed some trade-offs between your environmental, for example, and social or economic sustainability goals? As we work on structures for alignment, is this communication strong enough, or are the relationships strong enough to try to deal with and mitigate those potential trade-offs? Anybody want to take that?
So when you're talking about that, it makes me think about, I don't know this is a full answer, but what it makes me think about is, what the distinction between what are content areas and then kind of what are methodologies for addressing them. So I often think about engagement as kind of as a methodology for addressing the sustainability or the social or the economic things, right? So I don't know, just kind of thinking through that. So it feels less like a trade-off because you're leveraging kind of multiple, you're leveraging the good out of the different ways of doing it. So using methodologies to get at some of the different kinds of things that may seem like a trade-off at the beginning. I don't know, that's my initial thought.
Well, and Amanda, since you're at a land-grant institution, I want to bring up one of the things that's been mentioned on the Padlet, which is cooperative extension as one of those mechanisms. Do you work with the cooperative extension folks at Cornell, and how is that sustainability? How are those sustainability objectives implemented through extension?
Yeah, so we do work with extension quite a bit, and one of the things that we've been really focused on is getting undergraduates involved in extension projects and extension offices. So that's been kind of our focus, is how do we help extension officers, extension agents really think about the ways that they are providing research and engaged opportunities for undergraduates doing the work that they already are. I think at Cornell, at least, those sustainability goals are based kind of in each extension area. And so kind of it depends on what they're responding to in their areas, right? And responding to in their specific context about the ways that they either highlight or kind of bring in sustainability around that. And then we have the Atkinson Center, which I mentioned on the Padlet as well. And that's kind of serves as a central hub for all of the sustainability work on campus. And so I think having that kind of hub that does the storytelling, that collects the different research, that works with extension faculty, that works with students, you know, having that centralized place where all of that happens helps kind of with that communication that we've been talking about.
Yeah, and the energy of the students and the fact that the students are, you know, sort of taking classes in different places, and their excitement has also been mentioned on the Padlet. Sharon and Rena, have you had much experience with student involvement in these projects? What has been your experience in terms of their ability to connect some of the dots?
So the Rise 29 program that I talked about is fully student engaged, and it's focused on getting students and communities connected. We also have an emphasis on undergraduate research and in thinking about how faculty and students work together with community partners. So that's been an important way that we've connected the workforce of tomorrow to problems across our region and opportunities that we have to get the university engaged. So I think our students are leading sometimes our faculty by being excited about a topic and getting the faculty excited about a topic with different community partners.
I agree with that. Our students are very, very interested in issues regarding sustainability. We do have our Institute for the Study of the Environment, Sustainability, and Energy. We have lots of students involved with that. They are thrilled to go out into the region and do studies of water quality, looking at biodiversity and environmental restoration projects. We also have a terrific university garden program. And this is a way for our students to actually get out there and get their hands in the dirt. And we bring younger children from our community in and help them see how gardens grow and, you know, really get that high from seeing things grow and, you know, be able to have the harvest and have a celebration and those kinds of things. So I agree with Sharon that younger people are leading the way in this, and they see this as something that is a responsibility for themselves, and they really want to contribute to making the world a better place.
That's great. I really, that's been my experience as well. When I was teaching at the planning school at Portland State University, the Nohade Toulon School of Urban Studies and Planning, I really experienced a lot of students who felt that it was really their responsibility to take the next step towards the sustainability goals that we all have. So let's move on to the second question that we're going to ask on the Padlet. So Milan's going to drop that link in the chat, and then we'll go to that second question, which is what are the benefits of these different methods of alignment? And Amanda, I'm going to actually go to you to ask, what have you observed about, like you presented several different types of structures to us. Do you have a sense of what some of the key benefits are of these different types of structures?
Sure. So, you know, I think, again, as I said, it's context specific and mission driven based on your university and what you're wanting to do. But in my experience, network approaches are really good, particularly when you've got kind of an advanced group of folks. Folks that already have experience, that really do have, you know, their set research, their set experiences, they're ready to go. And networked approaches can really just kind of make sure that people feel committed and connected to whatever it is that you're hoping to advance. So I think that's one of the great things about them. I think laddered approaches can be really successful in being very efficient. So a laddered approach, right? There's a pretty clear sense of hierarchy. You have a good sense of kind of who's doing what, who's making decisions. Sometimes they're, you know, decide and announce decisions, perhaps a little bit less participatory, but very effective, right? You're going to know what's happening. Things are going to get moving. You're going to do that. I think that you can often see that sometimes depending on funding. Sometimes people will kind of take that approach with a funding, right? Like we're going to do this and this and this, and this is how the funding is going to roll. And then I would say that the collective impact and the backbone organization, that's really when you're looking to make sure that voices are being heard. You know, as a backbone organization, you're really there to kind of provide structure, provide kind of the ways that you kind of vision perhaps, provides some kind of the mechanisms, if you will, of getting together. But you're following where people in the rest of that collective impact organizations are going, right? You're listening to them, they're generating ideas and they're creating those ideas. And your job as the backbone organization is simply to support that and move it forward. So if you're in a space where that kind of really participatory need is happening, and where you have lots of organizations that have really good ideas and they just need to be brought together a little bit to be aligned and move forward, I think that collective impact models can be really useful in that way as well. And I would say at Cornell, we utilize all of them, kind of depending on where and what we're trying to do.
Well, that's really interesting. I see that someone has contributed to the Padlet that its structure isn't really the only way that alignment can be accomplished. I know that in some places, basically a strategic plan is used, and some sort of accountability to that strategic plan is employed in order to achieve that type of alignment. Do any of you have experience with that sort of lack of structure in terms of, a reporting structure, but the use of more of a strategic plan or an agreement of the goals that are to be accomplished and how we will measure them?
Well, I'd like to go back to a comment that Amanda made about networks being a very effective way of approaching this work. And we, over the past year, started what we're calling public engagement networks at NIU. And it is a voluntary convening of faculty, staff, students, community members around areas of interest. So the ones we have now are P20 education, workforce development, arts and culture, and nonprofits and NGOs. So it's a way of bringing people together to share what they're doing in terms of curriculum and research and those kinds of things, but also what kinds of impacts they're seeing that our programs are making, what kinds of needs and aspirations are there in the region that we could be serving. And as always, when you're bringing people together on campus, there are at least 2 or 3 people who say, oh my gosh, I had no idea that we had somebody else on campus who had the same interest. So just identifying those mutual areas of interest, finding new partners. We love to do that kind of matchmaking. And I think for our kinds of units, that is a great role to play. And again, it's voluntary. We're bringing people together who, some of these groups have kind of a strategic plan that they've put together. Here's what we'd like to do as a group. Some of the others just find value in coming together every once in a while. And, that works for them. And so that works for us. So that's kind of how we're approaching it.
Yeah, the network piece. How about you, Sharon?
I think I would, I don't have anything to contribute that Amanda and Rena haven't already said on that particular topic, but are related and a little bit of a tangent. I think one of the benefits of aligning in this way is that you get some successes that people can, that are tangible and that people can see, and then they can start to replicate. And so from a very practical perspective, thinking from the faculty, it allows a faculty member who is pre-tenure to look at some examples that can be incorporated into their CV and to allow them to build a body of work that's based on university community partnerships that result in tangible research. And so I think one part of aligning this is in building an internal community who are willing to engage in engagement. And when I think about the word network, it must just be what's going on right now, because we're doing the same thing, guys. We went back to our IEP. So good news, Sheila, is once in a while you dust off the IEP application and you look at what you said you were going to do. We've done that recently. And we've said, okay, we need to do a little bit more work around building that drive. We called ours Drive East. So we're creating a Drive East network that will involve people trying to work on doing a better job with alignment across innovation, entrepreneurship, and engagement.
Well, that's great to hear, Sharon. I think I'd like to move on to the last question that we're going to ask on our Padlet, which is question 3, and Milan's dropping that into the chat. And the question is about challenges to different methods of alignment. So what are the, I hate to end on a down note, but what are the things that have really sort of gotten in the way of the methods of alignment that you're using, the network piece, the backbone piece, the ladder? When you have a center that's really serving as that method for aligning different sustainability goals, one of the challenges is maintaining the funding for that center. What are some of the other challenges that we're facing and trying to make sure that the people who need to talk to each other are talking to each other and working together?
I think that it's hard because the work is hard. And sometimes you're doing the thing that is the long game, and you have to stay committed, and you have to stay consistent, and you have to be engaged and involved. And then something like COVID happens and we're all distracted on what is the emergency of the day, or there's a huge hurricane or whatever it is. And so trying to find a way to maintain and regain that traction in a sometimes dynamic environment is sometimes hard.
Mm-hmm. I would certainly agree with that. Time is always the resource that people don't have enough of, and other things start getting prioritized, and so that can make it difficult.
So a long-term commitment, and a long-term commitment is sometimes difficult to maintain, especially when you're facing changes in leadership at the university, I would imagine. I know that happens, and that sometimes priorities change. Amanda, what have you seen in terms of the challenges in keeping the priorities around sustainability front and center, and keeping people working towards them together?
Yeah, I was thinking about the challenges of partnership, right? I mean, so many of these issues can't be addressed unless we're in partnership and in relationship with all of the rest of the world that's also trying to solve these problems. And I think, making sure that our partnerships are really strong, making sure that they have enough funding, that they've been given enough time, right? That, we're doing the work to make sure that everybody is being heard, and that everybody is being kind of allowed what they need to get what they need out of those partnerships. And so, I think the ups and downs of that can be really taxing. And I think it can be taxing for faculty. I think it can be taxing for students. Like, it's for the partners. So I think that just really maintaining those partnerships that are absolutely critical to getting any of this work move forward can be a challenge in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm. And especially during COVID, right? I mean, when some of the partners are just either completely overwhelmed with what they're trying to do in the community, or they themselves have lost their ability to keep their employees on. I have a friend who runs a neighborhood level sustainability program in Portland, and sort of keeping her employees on and keeping this small nonprofit running has been just incredibly challenging during this time, and keeping her board's attention when they are focused on the sustainability of their own businesses. So a question has appeared on the Padlet. What's the best way to share community partners across the university units versus having faculty seek out novel relationships when there's an established partner at their university that may, it's still being typed. I think I understand what this person's getting at. So partners are a coveted resource, right? So how do you sort of coordinate across faculty or across academic and outreach units in terms of partnering with different organizations?
I want to hear a good answer to that one.
I was just thinking the same thing. I would like to hear the answer to that one.
That is a challenge. And I think that probably at the heart of the challenge there is trust. I mean, if you've put in the work to really develop that relationship with a partner, sometimes you feel a sense of, hey, it's mine, or are other people going to treat this partnership the way that I do? And, because it takes not only time to develop it, but you have to nurture it. And so I think I have to go back again to the relationship building, which means trust building too, so that if somebody comes to you with an idea and says, hey, the partner you've been working with would be great for my project too, that, you know, you could talk it through and, you know, get to a point where you're feeling like, yes, you know, that would be something that I would trust my colleague to do. And then also be able to talk with them about maybe what goals you would have that would be in common with the project that you're doing and the project that they're trying to do. So that's a slightly Pollyanna-ish response, but you know, this is something I know is difficult.
Well, we've got about 3 minutes left, and I just want to invite the rest of the, Amanda and Sharon, to make any closing comments. Steve, unfortunately, had to leave the webinar a little early, but we appreciate everyone's comments and everyone's remarks. Once again, the webinar is recorded, and we'll make that, along with the corrected PowerPoint, sorry about that, Sharon, available to the audience or to others who weren't able to be here today. So I'll just ask for some closing comments. I'll start with Amanda.
Oh, I'm just so excited to see Padlet work in real life. You know, I've been wanting to try it out, and I've been telling all my faculty members about it, and so it's really fun to see it. So thanks to everybody who used it to engage and participate. And really thanks to the other panelist members. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Sharon?
I'm just excited to have another opportunity to interact with our colleagues. I really did miss the summer meeting. And so these chances to get to share and explore topics are important, I think, for our own community of higher education administrators and faculty who are working on engagement. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks, everyone. And we look forward to seeing you in our August webinar. Lon, do you want to drop the information about the August webinar into the chat so everyone knows how to sign up and attend our August webinar?
Sheila, I will be putting that in the chat in just a few moments. Thank you so much for bringing that up. I know that many of you folks who have registered for the meeting should be receiving emails from us. Moving forward, you'll be receiving emails not only about upcoming webinar sessions, but also questions and answers that we couldn't get to during our session. So keep an eye out for that as well. I'll be placing a chat to the registration site in just a moment, and we want to thank you guys for joining us.
Thanks, everybody. It was a great conversation.